sights to see, rolling hills or city streets, ocean to ocean and all in between. It's out there just waiting on you and me. So look alive, 'cause while I was waiting for you, paradise is on the other side.
Welcome to Unreasonable, put on by the Jacksonville Civic Council. Interesting interviews from Jacksonville's most iconic entrepreneurs, CEOs, and wonderful success stories. They do things that are unexpected, unreasonably, in order to make their own change. In each episode, you'll meet passionate change makers who are rewriting the rules and daring to dream bigger for their community and our city. My hope that their stories ignite something in you, that you'll be inspired to reimagine what's possible and lead with purpose in your work, your life, and right here in Jacksonville. You're going to really be inspired. Welcome to another episode of Unreasonable. I'm your host, Josh Martino. I'm a member of the Jacksonville Civic Council, and today our guest is David Miller.
Yeah, glad to be here.
David Miller is co-founder and executive chairman of Brightway Insurance and chair of the Jacksonville Civic Council Foundation. David is an extraordinarily successful entrepreneur, philanthropist, and community leader. And like all of our guests on Unreasonable, David has lived much of his life pursuing ambitious goals, even when they seemed improbable or impractical. He's the embodiment of the quote, "A rising tide lifts all boats."
Okay, I think we're going a little far here,
Oh.
but I appreciate the sentiments, and I'm very grateful to be here with you, my friend.
I have only just begun, but this is what makes him great, and we're very fortunate that Jacksonville gets to call him one of ours. David, welcome to Unreasonable.
Glad to be here with you, Josh.
David, that quote, "A rising tide lifts all boats." What does that mean to you, and how do you apply it to your everyday life?
You know, it's funny. I heard something on my way over here that I thought was great, and it's that if you want to not have a ceiling, you've got to raise the floor. And you know, you just think about that. You've got to raise the floor, and you know, if everyone has an opportunity in the game to be, you know, to have hope, to be able to dream and believe that their dreams can come true, you have a community where people are working in the same general direction, and that's really important. You want to reduce friction, you want alignment. And those are the things we have to be focusing on.
We talk about that a lot on this podcast is as we raise the ceiling for what Jacksonville can be and blow the roof off. It's so important to raise the floor as well.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be mutually exclusive
Right.
tasks. We need to do them at the same time.
Well, people think, you know, they think of like a community and a community budget, just like they do their checking account, but they're not the same. You can actually, you know, it's not a finite pie. And so it's a completely different exercise. We need to grow the pie. And if we're growing, you know, it creates more opportunity for all kinds of people. If we're just focusing on how we invest in problems, we're never going to achieve our potential as a community. And so, you know, there are those who would like us to fix every septic tank and do that, and probably would take all our, you know, every bit of resources we have in the next 5 years. And you know what? No one's going to move to Jacksonville because we are the city that has no septic tanks, not one person.
Right.
And so, yeah, we've got to solve our challenges, but we got to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We've got to
This sentiment of yours and how you feel about bringing people up, I'm curious what set that off in your life. And I know I wanted to talk about a life-changing experience you had at the age of 19. At the time, you said you were living an all-American life, and then one day something changed. What happened?
Yeah, it's a personal, a really deeply personal and humbling experience, and to recall it. Essentially, I started out at the University of Florida in the summer, and by the fall, I was feeling lethargic. I'd never had any health issues, never a broken bone, never been in the hospital up until that point, and went to the clinic, who referred me to Shands, and from there, I after a period of, what seemed like not that long, I got some pretty devastating diagnosis that I had an inoperable cancerous tumor in my abdomen that was the size of a football and was involved in my liver and kidneys. And as you can imagine, the prognosis was not good. In fact, the probability was bleak. And so just imagine yourself being a 19-year-old feeling like, one day I'll die, but that's never going to happen. I mean, that's not even on your radar.
We all feel like we're invincible at that age.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, that whole reality comes crashing down, and you're just, as it starts to set in over a few days, you start to realize, like, basically the base case scenario is I'm not here in a year. And if I am, then I have bonus lives. And so makes you question everything and realize, like, time and people. Time is valuable. The people in your life are valuable. Is it really about me, or is it about, the difference that I make? Is it, and those sort of things. And that all really, it was a catalyst for me for several different things. That was a big part of it. But, also helping me realize that I can do much more than I thought I could. And I never needed to be afraid again, because there was nothing I was going to face that was probably going to equal that. And
those moments in between where you were maybe struggling do I want to fight? Is the prognosis even something to fight for, or should I give up? What motivated you in those moments to come to all these amazing realizations about, man, if I can get out of this, things are going to be different?
Well, let's be honest. I was 19 and stupid. In retrospect, I know it didn't occur to me that I was going to die. I mean, even though I literally had a doctor tell me, when I had my friends in the room, that I wasn't taking it seriously enough and they needed to leave because I wasn't recognizing the magnitude of the challenge I was facing. And I ultimately rejected that. And until someone, I remember an adult months later said, it has to be hard recognizing your own mortality, that you may be facing your own mortality. And it hit me at that point. And I said, but it was never a question of what I was going to do. I never questioned that. I was going to fight and I was going to do it. It's kind of, you don't know how you're going to deal with the situation until you're in that situation. And I found myself in that situation.
Now, when you, thankfully, obviously, since we're sitting here today, we all know how it ended. What did you do next? Did you stay at Florida?
Yeah, so it's interesting. You realize these things about yourself. And so one of the things you realize about yourself is that, and myself, is that I don't like being a victim. And I don't want to be seen as a victim. And I didn't want sympathy. And I found myself at UF, I was that guy, oh, I heard about you. Are you okay? Or, this kind of thing. And it was the most uncomfortable feeling for me because that's not how I saw myself and it's not how I wanted to be seen. And so ultimately I made a decision to leave University of Florida and go to Florida State University down the road. And because more than anything, I wanted to be in control of what my life was going to be, and I didn't want to be what other people saw me as. I wanted to control that. So what you have to recognize is there are things in life like the hand of the cards you're dealt, you can't control, but you have complete control in what you do with those cards. And so it sort of burned that into my psyche that I wasn't going to obsess about the hand of cards I was dealt. I wasn't going to, think about, was I this or was I that? And it really wasn't about me. At the end of the day, it's what am I here for, and what's the difference? And I'm not bashful to say I made a deal with God, you know, and in those days. And I said, look, I understand it doesn't look like I'm going to be here, but if you choose to let me be here, I'm going to make my life matter. And I'm going to try to do things in a way that would be serving you. And that's been with me. And, you know, the way we've proceeded as we've gone forward has continued to be about that journey around trying to understand how as either a leader or someone, it's not about me, but how I help other people see what's great in them. And that's really, it's affected everything. It affected our business and it's affected community engagement as well.
Well, speaking of your business, as young men, you and your brother Michael, you decided to start your own insurance company.
Yeah.
And you intentionally designed Brightway to be vastly different from the way most of the industry operated. I mean, what caused you to do something so different, turn it upside down? And because that seems pretty improbable and impractical in that field and in that profession.
Well, so it's interesting. So just to set the stage, we had a small insurance agency. When I say small, 3 employees on the north side of Jacksonville, right on the corner of Sutel and Lem Turner, burglar bars on the windows. And our competitors really that we competed against were State Farm, Allstate, Geico. These are companies that spent billions of dollars a year on advertising. We obviously spent nothing on advertising because we had nothing to spend on advertising. So the idea of just working harder, that wasn't an option. We had to rethink our value proposition and how we worked. We had no outside capital. So we had to think in different ways. We had to look at the lens of our business through, look at it differently. And that's exactly what we did. We recognized that these big insurance companies are trying to benchmark off each other. They're trying to think, you know, oh, this is what Geico's doing, so we've got to respond in this way. What they weren't doing is thinking of, from the customer standpoint, in a perfect world, what's great for the customer? And then if you're going to do that, how do you create alignment with the customer, the agents, the employees, the community? How do you build alignment so that people are naturally doing what's in their best interest? And by the way, if they're doing what's naturally in their best interest, it's good for the company too. It's good for Brightway.
So you had the freedom to make all of these changes, to see what was out there as status quo, turn it upside down, be unreasonable, and create your own product.
Yeah, it's we rethought it. I remember when people first heard the name Brightway, I would have people come up to me at Starbucks and be, Brightway? Like, what is that? That's not an insurance agency. An insurance agency is like, you know, Stone, Williams, and whatever. And I said, no, it's not. It speaks to a whole different way of doing business. And then when we became a franchise company and we became a franchisor for Brightway Insurance, people said, what, you're like McDonald's? You're going to be a you know, they couldn't see the forest through the trees. And that continued time and time again. But at the end of the day, it wasn't about those things. It was ultimately about people reaching their potential, whether it's customers being in a place where they're truly safe, they're secure, they're not burdened, they don't hate shopping for insurance because they never have to again. That's the question. It's not spend 15 minutes and, you know, we'll save you 15%. It's people don't want to spend 15 minutes. They don't want to talk to you. They don't want to have to do that. And, you know, and at the end of the day, it's for creating a future for people. At a time in 2008, 2009, the recession, people were worried about what their future is, just like they are today. We're worried about AI. We're worried about what our economy is going to look like. We've got a divisive kind of culture. And we need to be thinking differently about the same set of circumstances.
To pivot on the word you used, potential, right? You created a franchise system. You created something that was undefinable. You have this mantra of being undefinable. And you created potential and you created opportunity for other people to follow your model in order to be successful. Again, bringing people up, you're raising right, the other boats. Talk to me about what it is to create potential and create opportunity for others, and A, how that makes you feel, and B, when you see others achieving success with something that you created. What is the validation? How does that make you feel?
Yeah, it just is, what are you trying to do? Most people go through life and they're trying to win. Whatever that is, they're trying to make a sale. Most places where you buy a product, it's a win-lose situation. You think about it. You go, you have a restaurant. The idea of the restaurant is you charge as much as you can that someone will buy, and there's an elastic relationship there. But really, if in a perfect world, you create win-win alignments. You create alignments and you try to think about, you keep going back to the drawing board to think, how can I do things in a way that's great for our agents, our franchisees, that's also great for our customers, that's also great for the carriers we represent. And so and it was interesting, one year Forbes recognized this as the #1 franchise to buy in the nation, not just insurance franchise, but any franchise. And there were things that we did because we were asking the right questions. We weren't saying, how can we just sell more franchises? We were saying, how can we create an experience that allowed people to be successful, that de-risked their business and allowed them to be more profitable?
Using your playbook.
Using the playbook and designing the playbook, thinking of how we work together and bringing together assets and capabilities to help them manage something that was simpler, that was clearer, that was more effective, and allowed them to do that, grow quicker, be more profitable, and de-risk tremendously.
That's exactly right. And we're both in the franchise business, right? Your insurance, restaurants. And what I often tell our franchisees is, something they need to remember. We are not successful if you're not successful.
Yeah.
If you go out of business, we will go out of business.
Yep.
We've given you the playbook. The playbook has, for us, 76 years of success. Try not to mess with it too much, but make it your own. But out there in the real world, there are plenty of franchises, there are plenty of deal makers, there are plenty of businesses where someone's perception of a deal is that somebody should win and get over on the other person and somebody should lose at the end of the day.
Right.
What we're trying to do is create these win-win situations where each person makes a deal, they shake hands, each person walks away thinking they've won.
Yeah, and I think too, recognizing not just that they think they won, helping people realize that there's a possibility model where everyone wins. It's not just that you won, it's that we both won. Man, that's what we want to replicate.
Well, how do we replicate that for the city of Jacksonville? How do we make people want to come here? How do we want people to succeed here where they've made the effort, they're putting all their chips in Jacksonville, Florida? How do we make them feel like it's going to be a win for them? And how do we offer them somewhat of a playbook on the way in that makes them comfortable enough to go for it and succeed?
Well, one thing, Jacksonville's been in a holding pattern, had been in a holding pattern. It is not now. We are in the early innings of what's going to be a growth story and a success story, I believe, like no other. And we have to recognize that the wrong kind of thinking is exactly the thing we have to be careful of. The wrong kind of thinking is picking winners artificially and thinking that we have to make binary choices. An example was the Emerald Trail. One of the things that I and Brian Wolfberg, who is the CEO of ViStar, were the early champions of, and immediately recognized that a project like this, and I use this just as an example, it's the beginning, not the end. It had the attributes of any project that we really want to get behind in a community. It had multiple benefits for multiple constituencies. It actually increased the tax base. It linked communities together, and it linked those communities with schools. There was a resiliency play. It did all of these things. It helped us leverage our natural assets in terms of our climate, the fact that we are a place that has a tremendous amount of parks Right. And it did all those things. And so it was really, and it created ultimately an amenity, another amenity for developers to develop around.
Why are you so actively engaged? Why does it mean so much to you to advocate for your hometown and want to see it get where the Civic Council believes it can get, which is to be a world-class city comparable to some of the greatest cities in the world?
Well, fundamentally, I'd say look in the mirror. And I'm saying this to you, Josh. I go, you could have gone anywhere. You could have been in New York. You could have stayed in Atlanta. You could have gone to Miami, all these places. And at the end of the day, and I would ask anyone this, if you went to those places, is there any chance that those places would be different because you're there? Absolutely not.
Agreed.
They wouldn't be different. The fact that you're here and that you chose to be here is absolute proof positive that any person can come to Jacksonville today in this climate. We're a city that matters. We are, but not quite where we need to be. And we're a place where people help each other, where people want the same things. And we're a place of hope. We're a place where if you want someone to help you and do something with you, there's a can-do attitude here that is something that's special. Jacksonville's different because you're here. And there are a number of people who are realizing that. There are young people who are realizing that. There are people mid-career. There are people later stage. There are a lot of folks who are choosing to retire here because this is a place where things are improving and there's all kinds of opportunity to build and take advantage of these natural resources. Jacksonville's like an uncut diamond.
It is. You've often heard me call this town, it's a mosaic, right? I've used that analogy 100 times and that we're all these little tiles that we put up together. And it doesn't matter who you are, what your last name is, how many commas and zeros are in your bank account. Your impact is the same as anyone else if you have the moxie to pick it up and put it on the wall. And I don't know anywhere else in this country, at least that I've lived in, where those opportunities exist for impact.
Right.
And I think that that's going to draw talent. That's going to draw the right kind of people here if those opportunities exist for them to have impact.
Yeah.
And if we get, thousands and thousands of people moving to our city who want to make Jacksonville all that it can be, that's going to accelerate us to this goal that we have in mind much faster and collaboratively, and it's going to be really great to see.
Yeah, there's a concept, but the idea is most people they do what's easy and they avoid what's hard. In fact, when you do that, you're becoming weaker. It's like if you don't exercise, you're not going to get stronger. People know that. That's a fact. But it's true in life too. And if you focus on what is challenging, and you focus on those obstacles, those things make you stronger.
What is the Civic Council's way of achieving all the things you just talked about? With this moment in time, how does the Civic Council accomplish all of these goals using all of these amazing resources, putting all of this talent to work to make Jacksonville this world-class city?
Well, I think the first thing is to recognize if we want a great long-term outcome, we've got to have great long-term vision. And most of the time we're operating in the moment and we're making decisions that's, how's this going to be good for us in the next short period of time? I think when we take our eyes and we put them in 10 to 20 years and we go through a process as a community of saying, what is that vision? Where do we want to be? And what has to be there? That is where the Civic Council is unique in Jacksonville.
The city of renderings, the best kept secret on the East Coast, all the titles that Jacksonville has had, not to call it a failure, but just unrealized potential and just lack of progress.
Yeah.
So how do we take what it can be perceived as failing to recognize all this potential for years and turn it into success?
What do you think that is?
I think part of it's mentality, and I think part of it is leadership. And I think, like you said earlier, we have all the resources. And I think it's a matter of putting the right ingredients in at the right time.
Yeah.
It's a recipe.
But
there's no standard formula.
At the end of the day, it's about people having confidence. It's about people not focusing on fear and believing. And we're seeing more and more examples of that. That's what we have to focus on. We don't need to convince the last person that Jacksonville is a world-class city. We need to just create enough momentum that the early adopters then affect the midterm adopters, and the late-term adopters, they'll come along too. And I've seen that happen. I've seen it happen with use the Emerald Trail. I've seen it happen with the Jacksonville Jaguars and success we've had. Jacksonville routinely, by the way, has voted for tax increases in spite of what people think, because when they see a path and they want to believe, people want to believe, but we need to be our mind. We have to see it too.
I always think of it, we have to support the flag bearers, right? Too often, and we talk about downtown a lot, there's somebody willing to be the pioneer and raise that flag and run full speed downtown or to another area of town that has needs for growth or recognized potential. And they get there and they plant their flag and they make an investment and they turn around and nobody's there.
Yeah.
And I see what's happening now at Emerald Trail and all the construction and all the, look at Springfield's blowing up and all these great neighborhoods, Murray Hill's grown, all these great boroughs of Jacksonville are starting to explode because the flag bearers are now turning around and seeing more and more people saying, I'm in.
That's right.
I'm willing to take that. And if you get tired, hand me the flag and I'll take it from here. I think there is more support. There is more desire. There's more of a belief that it's happening. I think you can see it, physically see it. And so it's not a rendering anymore.
Well, I think it comes down to, what are we focusing on? Are we focusing on our differences, or are we focusing on the things that we share? It's really that simple. You know, there's something called Occam's razor. You talk about quotes, Occam's razor. If all the choices are equal, the simplest is the best. And so when you're talking about getting everyone on the same page, really is very simple. We can either obsess about our differences, about whether you're a Republican or Democrat, whether you're white or black, whether you're rich or poor, or what faith you are. We can obsess about those differences, and at the end of the day, we'll be digging and digging, and we'll never hit China. Or we can recognize the reality of the things that we share, our strengths, our location, our shared dreams, our hopes. These are the things we want. And by the way, we share fears too.
Well, one final question that we ask everyone on this show: how is David Miller unreasonable?
Well, there are a lot of ways. I think I'll say I'll always say what I think, and I'd rather. You talked about loyalty. Everyone kind of wants you to be the friend they want you to be. I would rather be the friend that people need, not the ones they necessarily want. And it really involves standing up for what you believe and what you believe is right, more so than just being there and doing what someone else wants you to do. Recognizing with your feet squarely on the ground, you need to be able to look at situations and say, is the question we're being asked to answer the right question? Not what's the right answer. Is it the right question? And then from there, say, how do I respond?
Well, you've certainly been that friend to me, and I genuinely appreciate how you inspire others in this community, how you inspire leaders in this community to get more out there and have an impact. Thank you for everything you do for Jacksonville. Look forward to continuing our work, our friendship. And that's going to do it for this episode of Unreasonable. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Unreasonable. Look for us online, follow us on social media, and wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Ocean to